The elderly woman was kicked out of a luxury store until her driver arrived with a limousine. The autumn air carried a crisp chill as Eleanor Winters adjusted her simple woolen coat, stepping carefully onto the gleaming sidewalk of Fifth Avenue. At 78, she moved with the deliberate grace that came from decades of careful living. Her silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, her face lined with the geography of a life well lived. Today marked the 5th anniversary of her husband Richard's passing, and she had decided to purchase something special to honor his memory. The luxury boutique stood imposing with its gilded facade and pristine windows displaying handbags that cost more than many people's monthly salaries. Eleanor approached slowly, her sensible shoes clicking softly against the pavement. The doorman hesitated momentarily before opening the heavy glass door, his eyes flicking over her modest attire with barely concealed judgment. Inside, crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors. The scent of expensive leather and subtle perfume hung in the air. Eleanor breathed deeply, reminded of the department stores Richard would take her to on special occasions. A sharp-featured sales associate approached, her smile tightening as she assessed Eleanor. Can I help you?" The question carried an edge that suggested the opposite intention. "Yes, I'd like to see your collection of leather handbags, please." Eleanor's voice was soft but clear, the remnant of her teaching days still evident in her precise diction. The associate, Vanessa, according to her name tag, made a show of looking around the nearly empty store. "Our pieces start at $4,000. Perhaps there's another establishment that might better suit your budget?" Eleanor felt her cheeks warm. "I'm quite aware of your pricing, young lady. I'd still like to see the collection." Two younger associates exchanged glances, one smirking behind a manicured hand. Eleanor stood straighter, remembering Richard's words, "Never let them see you bend." Vanessa sighed theatrically. "You're welcome to look, but please understand, these are delicate items. We request that customers handle them with care." The implication stung, but Eleanor nodded and moved toward a display of elegantly crafted bags. She reached out, her fingers hovering over a burgundy leather piece that reminded her of a bag Richard had given her for their 40th anniversary. "Ma'am!" Vanessa's voice cut sharply through the quiet store. That particular piece is $6,500. Eleanor withdrew her hand, not out of concern for the price, but from the growing discomfort of being watched like a potential shoplifter. She had weathered too many storms in life to break down in a store, but the weight of their judgment pressed against her chest like a physical thing. Outside, dark clouds had gathered, mirroring the heaviness in her heart. Had she become invisible with age? Was her worth now measured only by the apparent cost of her clothing? "I believe I'll need to speak with your manager," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the embarrassment warming her cheeks. The request seemed to irritate Vanessa, whose practiced smile tightened further. "Our manager is currently in a meeting. Perhaps you could return another day, with an appointment." The suggestion was delivered with artificial sweetness. Eleanor felt her patience waning. After 50 years teaching high school English in Brooklyn, she had developed a radar for insincerity. "I'll wait," she replied simply, moving to perch on an elegantly uncomfortable velvet settee. The associates huddled near the register, whispering and casting occasional glances her way. Eleanor pulled out her old flip phone. She had never seen the need for anything fancier, and checked the time. Marcus, her late husband's former driver whom she retained after Richard's passing, would be arriving soon. She had asked him to pick her up in an hour, hoping to have made her purchase by then. 20 minutes passed, with no manager appearing. When Eleanor approached the counter again, Vanessa's patience had clearly evaporated. "Ma'am, we're preparing for important clients arriving soon. I must ask you to come back another time." "Important clients?" Eleanor echoed, her teacher's voice returning. "And what makes them important, while I am not?" A security guard had materialized nearby, his presence unmistakably intended as intimidation. Eleanor felt a flash of indignation. She had marched for civil rights in the 1960s and weathered far more threatening situations than this overpriced boutique. Perhaps, Vanessa suggested with exaggerated patience, you'd be more comfortable at the department store 3 blocks down. Eleanor considered her option. Richard would have created a scene, demanded respect, but that had never been her way. She thought of the countless times she'd taught her students about dignity in the face of injustice. How many essays had she assigned on Atticus Finch's quiet strength? How often had she counseled teenage girls to value themselves beyond appearances? The irony wasn't lost on her that at 78 she was being judged precisely by the superficial standards she'd spent a lifetime teaching against. Her wedding ring, a modest band Richard had upgraded 3 times as their fortunes improved, but which she'd always refused to replace, felt heavy on her finger. "I see," she said quietly. "Well, I'll be sure to let my late husband's foundation know about today's experience when we review our annual charitable contributions." The statement hung in the air, but Vanessa merely smiled condescendingly. "Of course, ma'am. The door is this way." Outside, the sky had darkened further, and a light rain began to fall. Eleanor realized she had left her umbrella inside the store. Dignity prevented her from returning for it, so she stood under the narrow awning, shoulders straight despite the humiliation burning in her chest. She watched people hurry past, young professionals clutching expensive coffee cups, tourists with shopping bags, businessmen with purposeful strides. No one seemed to notice the elderly woman standing alone in the rain, pushed out of a world that had decided she no longer belonged. Eleanor checked her watch again. Marcus was running late, unusual for her. The rain had intensified, pattering against the awning and spilling onto her shoes. She considered calling him, but hesitated to appear impatient. A young woman hurried under the awning, shaking water from her umbrella. She wore simple jeans and a raincoat, clearly not the boutique's target clientele. Their eyes met briefly. "Crazy rain, right?" the young woman offered with a genuine smile. "Forecast said sunshine all day." "Weather forecasters and politicians," Eleanor replied with a small smile. "The only professionals who keep their jobs despite being consistently wrong." The young woman laughed, a bright, unrestrained sound that seemed to lighten the gray afternoon. "I'm Sophie," she said, extending her hand. "Eleanor Winters," she responded, taking the offered hand. "Are you waiting for someone, Ms. Winters?" "It's really coming down now." Before Eleanor could answer, the boutique door opened, and Vanessa emerged, speaking over her shoulder to the security guard. "Just lingering out here now. Can you please ask her to move along? She's deterring actual customers." The words carried clearly through the rain. Sophie's expression shifted to confusion, then indignation, as she realized Vanessa was referring to Eleanor. "Excuse me," Sophie said, stepping toward Vanessa. "This woman is waiting for her ride. There's no law against standing under an awning during a downpour." Vanessa assessed Sophie's casual attire with the same dismissive glance she had given Eleanor. "This is private property. The awning belongs to the boutique." "Actually," Sophie countered, "city ordinances classify sidewalk coverings as public easements, regardless of who pays for their installation." Eleanor watched with quiet admiration as Vanessa's composure fractured slightly. It seemed Sophie knew her municipal codes. "Fine," Vanessa conceded, "but we have important clients arriving, and they might be disturbed by the sight of an elderly woman waiting for her ride." Sophie finished, her voice rising slightly. "Maybe they should shop somewhere with better values." The security guard looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight between feet. "Ma'am, I'm just doing my job." "I understand," Eleanor said to him gently, "and I'll be on my way as soon as my driver arrives." As if summoned by her words, a sleek black Lincoln Town car pulled up to the curb, its wipers working steadily against the rain. Marcus emerged with an umbrella, his tall frame dignified in his chauffeur's uniform despite the weather. "Mrs. Winters, I apologize for the delay," he called. approaching quickly. "There was an accident on Park Avenue." "Quite all right, Marcus," Eleanor replied, conscious of Vanessa watching from the doorway. "This young lady has been keeping me company." Marcus held the umbrella over Eleanor and Sophie as they walked to the car. Behind them, Eleanor could hear Vanessa speaking urgently into her phone, her tone suddenly anxious. "Mrs. Winters!" Vanessa called, hurrying after them. "There seems to have been a misunderstanding. Our manager would be happy to speak with you now." Eleanor paused by the car door. Rain pattered against Marcus's umbrella, and somewhere nearby, a taxi honked impatiently. The moment stretched between them. Vanessa's newly solicitous expression, Sophie's barely contained indignation, Marcus's protective presence. "I believe the misunderstanding was entirely on your part," Eleanor said finally, her voice gentle but firm. "You assumed my worth based on my appearance. That's a mistake I try never to make with others." "Please," Vanessa insisted, her career anxiety palpable. "If you could just come back inside." "I don't think today is the right day after all," Eleanor replied. "Perhaps another time." As Marcus helped her into the car, Eleanor turned to Sophie. "Would you like a ride somewhere, dear? This rain shows no sign of stopping." Sophie hesitated, then nodded gratefully. "If it's not too much trouble, I'm headed to Greenwich Village." Once they were settled in the car's leather interior, Sophie exhaled loudly. "I can't believe how they treated you. Do you want me to post about it online? I have a decent following, and that kind of behavior deserves to be called out." Eleanor considered this modern form of justice. "No, I don't think so. Vanessa will remember today's lesson far better without public shaming added to it." "You're kinder than I would be," Sophie admitted. "What were you shopping for, anyway?" "A gift for myself, actually," Eleanor said, watching raindrops race down the window. "Today is the anniversary of my husband's passing." Sophie's expression softened. "I'm so sorry." 5 years now," Eleanor continued. "Richard always said life is too short for bad coffee and uncomfortable shoes. He was right about that, among many things." Marcus caught her eye in the rearview mirror, his expression warm with shared memories of Richard. They had worked together for nearly 30 years. "Were you married long?" Sophie asked. 52 years, Eleanor replied, the number still miraculous to her. "We met at a protest march in 1966. He was a corporate lawyer with surprisingly radical politics." As the car glided through rain-slicked streets, Eleanor found herself sharing stories with Sophie about Richard, about their life together, about the foundation they had established to provide scholarships for underprivileged students. "That's amazing," Sophie said. "I'm actually a teacher, 7th grade at a public school in the Bronx. We could use more foundations like yours." Eleanor felt a spark of connection. "I taught high school English for 50 years in Brooklyn. Public education is the cornerstone of democracy. I've always believed." Sophie's eyes widened. 50 years? That's incredible dedication. "The last 20 as department chair," Marcus added from the front seat, pride evident in his voice. "Mrs. Winters was something of a legend in the district." Eleanor waved away the praise. "What about you, Sophie? Do you enjoy teaching?" As Sophie described her classroom challenges and triumphs, Eleanor recognized the same passion that had driven her own career. The rain continued its steady rhythm against the car, creating a cocoon of intimacy in the back seat. "I should give you my card," Sophie said suddenly, "for the foundation. We're always looking for resources for our students." They exchanged information as the car approached Greenwich Village, the streets narrower here, buildings more eclectic than the polished wealth of Fifth Avenue. "This is me," Sophie said, as they pulled up to a weathered brownstone. "Thank you so much for the ride, Mrs. Winters." "Eleanor, please," Sophie smiled. "Eleanor, and thank you for reminding me that dignity doesn't diminish with age. My students need to hear that message." After Sophie departed, Marcus turned to Eleanor. "Home, Mrs. Winters." Eleanor considered for a moment. "No, Let's try Bergdorf Goodman instead. I still want to find something to mark the day." "Mr. Winters would approve," Marcus said with a smile, pulling carefully back into traffic. At Bergdorf's, the experience couldn't have been more different. The saleswoman who assisted her, Patricia, around Eleanor's age, treated her with respectful attention, bringing several handbags for her consideration without a single comment about prices. "This one has a lifetime warranty," Patricia noted, showing Eleanor a beautifully crafted leather satchel in deep burgundy. My grandmother always said, buy quality once, rather than mediocrity repeatedly." "Your grandmother was a wise woman," Eleanor replied, running her fingers over the supple leather. "This is the one." 1 week later, Eleanor sat in her study, correcting the latest batch of essays from the creative writing workshop she still taught twice monthly at her former high school. Her new burgundy handbag rested on the desk beside her, already becoming a cherished possession. The doorbell rang, and soon her housekeeper appeared. "Mrs. Winters, you have a visitor," a young woman named Sophie. Eleanor welcomed Sophie warmly, noting her nervous energy. "What brings you to the Upper East Side on a Saturday?" "I hope I'm not intruding," Sophie began, perching on the edge of an armchair. But I had an idea after meeting you, and I wanted to discuss it in person," she explained her proposal. "A program bringing elderly community members into classrooms, not just for one-off career days, but as regular presences, bridging generational divides and providing students with the wisdom of experience." "Many of my kids don't have grandparents in their lives," Sophie explained, "and there are so many seniors with knowledge and time to share. I thought maybe your foundation might help coordinate and fund such an initiative," Eleanor finished, already intrigued. "It's an excellent idea. Richard would have loved it." They spent the afternoon outlining the program, Eleanor's teaching experience complementing Sophie's enthusiasm. By evening, the bones of the project were in place, with Eleanor agreeing to be the first participant. As they finished their tea, Sophie hesitated before asking, "Did you ever go back to that boutique to show them they were wrong about you?" Eleanor smiled. "No need. Living well is its own reward. Besides," she added with a twinkle in her eye, "Marcus informed me that their parent company has been seeking funding for expansion. Richard's foundation is on their prospective investor list. Will you invest?" Sophie asked. "Perhaps," Eleanor mused. "Yes, but I'd require certain changes to their customer service policies first. Sometimes, lessons need reinforcement." Later, after Sophie had gone, Eleanor stood by the window overlooking Central Park. The trees were shedding their autumn colors, preparing for winter's approach. Change was inevitable. In seasons, in circumstances, in life itself. She thought of Richard, of how he would have handled the boutique situation with his characteristic blend of indignation and humor. She missed him still, a constant ache that had softened but never disappeared. Yet somehow, that humiliating moment under the rain-soaked awning had led to something unexpected, a new friendship, a new purpose, perhaps even a way to create positive change. Richard would have appreciated the irony. Eleanor smiled at her reflection in the window glass. A 78-year-old woman still capable of surprise, still engaged with the world, still finding new ways to matter. The boutique had seen only an elderly woman in sensible shoes. They had failed to see everything else she was and had been: teacher, wife, philanthropist, and now, once again, innovator. Some people would always judge by appearances, but Eleanor knew better. Worth wasn't found in designer labels or luxury cars. It was built through decades of choices, through kindness offered and received, through the lives touched and improved along the way. That was a lesson worth teaching at any age.